సార్ స్టార్ట్ చేయండి సార్.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Good afternoon to all my dear student friends. I am Dr. N. Sriramlu, working as a professor in the Department of Political Science and Public Administration, SV University. Today, I have to study the great national leader, Mahatma Gandhi. So, it was William Churchill who described Gandhi as a half-naked fakir and also old humbug, adding that it was a alarming jest. Mr. Gandhi is one of the middle temple liar, half-naked and etc. were criticized some of the Britishers, but Mahatma Gandhi proved is a father of the nation. So he did not mouth the name of the Christ, but acted as accepted every word of the Sermon of the Mount. So Mahatma Gandhi is one of the greatest leaders who are accepted worldwide. So in his lifetime, Gandhi had been pursued successfully and simultaneously as a Bolshevik, a fanatic or a troublemaker or hypocrite, and also eccentric and reactionary and revolutionary, and also he is one of the saint, renouncer, and an avatar. He was a generally likened both to Lenin and to Jesus Christ, indicating the wide scope of representations. After his death, two views of him have become dominant in India. He is celebrated as the father of the nation, and also outside outside India, he is remembered as an upstart of non-violence. Such impoverishment in the range of representations is partly due to the selective way in which collective memory works. It also was a lot of deliberate attempts at appropriating him. There is some of the more objectives, base unit of purpose, aims, Indian Gandhian thought, how Gandhi discussed social, economic, and political problems from higher moral and humanistic vantage point. The necessities to study Gandhian thought both in its entirely in its setting and context. Gandhi methodology, when we study about the Gandhi methodology, it's very nice to see. Gandhi taught us the doctrine of Satyagraha. Anybody can respond? Gandhi taught us the doctrine of Satyagraha not as a passive submission to evil, but as an active and positive instrument for the peaceful solution of all kinds of differences, personal, national, or international. He showed us that the human spirit is more powerful than the mightiest of weapons. He applied moral values to political action and also pointed out that ends and means can never be separated, but the means ultimately govern the end. If the means are evil, then the end itself becomes destroyed, deserted, at least partly evil. Any society based on injustice must necessarily harbor the seeds of conflict and decay within it. So long as it does not get rid of that evil. In Gandhi, there was one of the different influences which guided him to mold a mighty instrument of satyagraha, and also he gave direction to his mission. In Gujarat, Mahatma Gandhi main New Testament from Palestine book Russia, pamphlet from America, and also a book, The Influence from Britain, and many more. All these influences came together to lead Gandhi a hand to one of the life destiny into the battlefield of the 20th century to wage one of the noblest battles that have been Mahatma Gandhi main liberation of entire nation. The they combined make Gandhi as a one of the greatest non-violent revolutionary of the age. Gandhi was not an intellectual in the academic sense of the term. He was not a scholar or philosopher. He was not a theoretician also. His thinking had the quality of creative genius. He was preeminently a man of action. He has written a great deal, but his writings are designed as guide to action and acquisition of knowledge. They are generally concerned with the solution of his actual problems. Many cited Mahatma Gandhi discussion of the theory is always brief and sketchy. As soon as Gandhi had an idea or one of the plan, he tried to put into practice and induced others to like others. That's why he gave more explanations. Gandhi did not acquire his ideas and knowledge merely from books. He did not pass his time in libraries and museums poring over musty volumes. Much of his knowledge was the result of direct contact with life and the practical experience it offered. Therefore, placed his ideas before the public, not in the languages of the learned books. That's why he is not more intelligent but has a lot of practice in his life. Gandhi offers no such convenient theories logically or mathematically worked out. There are, you have said, many gaps in reasoning and apparent contradictions. Gandhi thought rapidly that jumped over many connecting links in the chain of reasoning. Gandhi discussed economic and political problems from a higher moral and humanistic point of view. Gandhi views life as an organic whole. His concrete schemes are therefore intimately, organically connected with one another. Unity is achieved through some definite guide and regulating ideas, values, and principles. So, excuse me. Hello. Can anybody respond?
1 minute, sir. 1 minute, please.
The continuous growth and evolution of Gandhi personality and his ideas through the years present another difficulty is systematizing his thought. So there are
Rajiv Kumar.
Mahatma Gandhi practically took Hindu Swaraj, he has talked of machinery and the factories as if this could altogether eliminated from the life of a nation. He also talks of doctors and drugs as if they could be entirely dispensed with. There are many institutions whose functioning can and should be modified for social health, but Gandhi would talk as if he wanted their entire elimination and held that this was possible. Gandhi's habit of stating his propositions and plans as if they were practical presents one more difficult in interpreting his thought. He always said that the theoretically possible was also the practical. The differences between the possible and the ideal must be clearly brought to understand Gandhi's thought. Gandhi's thought then must be judged and evaluated on its own merits and not always on Gandhi's arguments. The student must not content himself with Gandhi's reasoning, but his style. His style are the words and the expressions he used. Like every greater reformer, his thought is greater than his words and arguments. See, conducting is more revealing and than the arguments he advances for a particular course of action. He behaved towards friends and opponents. His public and private life was an open book. Therefore, his writings must be studied along with it. The writings alone may not bring out the full implications of his philosophy of life, individual and social. Further, the student must rely on his own intelligence, knowledge, and experience for a proper understanding of Gandhiji's ideas, policies, and programs. So, the popular image of Gandhi depicts him as an ordinary nationalist who was engaged in selfless and dedicated service for the liberation of India from British colonial domination through non-violent techniques of political action. This indeed is true. Gandhi was deeply involved in the struggle for political emancipation and social and economic reconstruction of India, to which be devoted his whole attention. However, what is often not understood is that Gandhi did in world context. His contributions to Indian political independence is one of the greatest way. Is viewed of concerning only one or two nations is an isolated manner. Gandhiji himself had said, my mission is not merely the freedom of India, though today it undoubtedly engrosses practically the whole of my life and the whole of my time. But though the realization of the freedom of India, I hope to realize and carry on the mission of brotherhood of men. My patriotism is not an exclusive thing. It is all embracing, and I should reject that patriotism which sought to mount upon the distress or exploitation of other nationalities. That is the Mahatma Gandhi principle or views regarding to the society. సమాజంలో అతనికి ఉన్నటువంటి దృక్పథం. Gandhi's movement for national independence was, in a way, aimed at the reordering of the world power structure, which was based on the imperial colonial pattern of international relations. He wanted freedom for India, not to isolate her from the rest of the world, but to promote international cooperation. True international cooperation was possible only when the interacting nations were sovereign and equal before international law. In Gandhi's own words, my nation of Purna Swaraj is not isolated, not isolated independence, but healthy and dignified interdependence. My nationalism peers through is not exclusive. So it's not designed to harm or any nation or any individual. We want to harm to any individual, legal, maximum or not so legal, as they are moral. I believe in the eternal truth of in the society. Mahatma Gandhi always non-violent ideas. Here, Gandhi's anarchy is not in the leads to disorder, but which relates to condition of statelessness as a result of the existence of an enlightened harmony that dispenses with the necessity of a state to enforce behavior patterns. The power structure of non-violent society would be distributed in such a way that each individual or each cooperative unit of individual would constitute a power unit and society would equilibrate itself on the basis of the existence of this power structure. In his ideal stateless democracy or enlightened anarchy, there was no use of force in any form. Whereas society acquired equilibrium by individual perfection, such a non-violent society would consist of groups of settled villages and individual perfection. Such a non-violent society would consist of groups of settled villages. A non-violent India was expected to strive for removal of injustice anywhere and crusade. Gandhi's patriotism was not exclusive. It was calculated not only not to hurt another nation, but to benefit all in the true sense of the word. Gandhiji had said that we want freedom for our country, but not at the expense or exploitation of others or to degrade other countries. I do not want the freedom of India if it means the existence of England like England. So that's why he let that be our nationalism, his movements for self-government, Swaraj, and for the use of homemade goods, Swadeshi, might have come into conflict with the interest of the others countries, especially those of England. But then Gandhiji movements were directed primarily against the injustice done by England in keeping another nation in subjugation by force, thereby denying it opportunities for free development. He believed that by enabling India to be free, he was not only helping India but also Britain in an indirect way. So, removing the possibilities for England to be unjust to another nation, besides the moral strength which an independent India could give to other subject nations, was another factor. So, Gandhi conceived that true nationalism was a contribution to internationalism. Thus, Gandhi wanted national independence before international cooperation. You want cooperation between nations for the salvation of civilization. I want it too, but cooperation, free nations worthy of cooperation. If I am to help in creating or restoring peace and goodwill and resist disturbances, thereof I must have the ability to do so, and I can't do so unless my country has come to its own. At the present moment, the every movement for freedom in India's contribution to peace. For so long as India is a subject nation, not only is she danger to peace, but also to England, which exploits India. Other nations may tolerate today England's imperialist policy and her exploitation of other nations, but they certainly do not appreciate it, and they would gladly help in the prevention of England becoming a greater and greater means every day. Of course, we will say that freedom, India can become a menace of herself, but let us assume that she will behave herself with her doctrine of non-violence. This is the one of the most important principle of Mahatma Gandhi. If she achieves her freedom through it, for all her bitter experiences of being a victim of exploitation, Gandhiji's prediction indeed came true. India's achievement of freedom generated a wave of nationalistic movements in many subjected nations. The Africa, ASEAN, and the realization by colonial powers of the necessity to end colonial rule and the subsequent gaining of freedom by several countries could be linked with Gandhiji's freedom movement. Thus, colonial oriented world social structure has given way to a more democratically oriented one. The world power structure underwent a transformation in a non exploitative direction. Yet the world is not devoid of exploitation. The old imperial colonial pattern of power structure has been replaced by new types of alignments and power blocks. The world society of today retains its feudal characteristics in spite of the fact that colonials have received their freedom. The economic domination of a few countries still indirectly influences the less affluent developing countries. The time log in economic development and technical progress is fully utilized to compensate for the loss of colonial power or realize new imperialistic ambitions. Though every national independent state is sovereign, and such a sovereign is respected, and all big power game in spite of the existence of the United Nations. It is in this connection that the Gandhi view of world social order merits consideration. Gandhi did not believe in the efficacy of the United Nations because the United Nations, for all its virtues, is no help for creating or maintaining or enlarging the number of states. A modern state with its military strength always possesses potentialities for suppression of freedom internally and creation of wars or international conflicts externally. So, the establishment of a world state by merely extending the characteristics of a modern state With or without surrendering, national sovereignties would suffer. So almost all countries are surrendering. National sovereignties would suffer from the deficiency of the latter. When viewed from a Gandhian angle, a world sovereign state above all national states may, after all, not be able to establish or maintain a peaceful world society in spite of the military strength or power it may possess. Gandhiji's opposition to the UN, it is to be understood in this perspective. He was opposed to the United Nations so far as it is possessed the attributes of nation states in regard to military potential and in regard to its opposition. So Mahatma Gandhi, there is some significance quotations for the nationalism and internationalism. One quotation like, I would like to see India free and strong so that she may offer herself as a willing and pure sacrifice for the betterment of the world. That is one of the important quotations which were given by Mahatma Gandhi. My religion has no geographical limits. There is no limitations for the religion, according to him. There is no limit to extending our services to our neighbors across state made frontiers. I believe that true democracy can only be an outcome of non-violence. The structure of a world federation can be raised only on a foundation of non-violence, and non-violence will have to be totally given up in world affairs, according to Gandhi's. I do not want, like some of the whole world must be with patriotism. My patriotism includes the good of mankind in general. Therefore, my service to India includes the service of humanity. Isolated independence is not the goal of the world state. It is voluntary interdependence. I want to make no grand claim for our country, but I see nothing grand or impossible about our expressing our readiness for universal interdependency. These are all some of the world quotations regarding to Gandhi thoughts. In the words of Jawaharlal Nehru, Gandhi was an intense nationalist. Our world contest is enunciated in the uh, Gandhi views. Sometimes a man who felt he had a message not only for India but for the world, according to Nehru, ardently desired world peace. His nationalism therefore had a certain world outlook, and also he was entirely free from any aggressive intent, desiring the dependence of India. He had come to believe that a world federation of interdependent states was the only right goal, however distant that might be. These are all some of the words which were given by the our um, dear ex-Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. So the Gandhian model of power distribution in a national or world context is enunciated in the following statement which Gandhi made in elucidating his concept of decentralized state power. Gandhi's view of world social order is essentially one of the moral order. Satyagraha and a soul force symbolized for Gandhi the attainment of morals. Moral means Satyagraha as a philosophy of social action. It was not merely an instrument to attain political, economic, or other material ends, for the spiritual and moral transformation of man. It was a soul force generated out of a motivation to follow the path of truth and non-violence and was based on self-help, self-reliance and faith in God. Gandhi's theory of non-violence is positive philosophy, not a passive ethics. It is based on the assumption that men who wish to practice it must have certain moral and spiritual prerequisites, a positive love for all beings, and the pursuit of truth. The tradition of non-violence perhaps existed in all cultures, but Gandhi converted it into a practical ethics which could be applied in day to day life. This offered tremendous possibilities for contemporary India as well as the whole world. Here was an alternative to physical force which had so far been acknowledged. Acharya Kripalani supplements this point following phrases: the moral principles which guide the conduct of individuals in the social field must also guide their conduct in the political and the international fields. If we are to be saved from the cruel contradictions of a moral man living in an immoral, so political and international world order, we must find a unifying principle in life which will save us from this moral dichotomy. This unifying principle Gandhiji holds is supplied as in social life, so in political and international life and conducting by morality. Assessing the contributions of Gandhi, wrote Gandhiji's continue what Buddha began. In the Buddha, the spirit of love set itself the task of creating different spiritual contradictions or conditions in the world. In Gandhi, it undertakes to transform all worldly conditions. Would the world tend to order itself in the directions indicated by Buddha and Gandhi, or dismiss them the otherworldly utopian set to destroy itself by the creation of artificial power? There is some blocks and of the exploitation or the promotion of international conflicts. So, can understand about this Gandhiji's introduction, how he was one of the greatest fact in the story of man on earth is not his material achievement, but the empires he has built and broken, but the growth of his soul from the age to age in its search for truth and goodness. That's why we know about some views about Gandhiji. One minute, please. The second chapter, the second unit, Gandhiji in South Africa. Mahatma Gandhiji. He was one of the greatest personalities in the history of mankind and revered by millions all over the world, left an underlying legacy of rare ethical insight through the experience of his eventful life. He has some Gandhiji had come to South Africa in 1893 as a youth of 24 years who had attained his degree of Barrister of Law from the Inner Temple, England in 1891. On his return to India, he started his practice in his home state by his own admission. He was painfully shy and could not utter a word in the court. He returned to Rajkot, where he took to drafting applications for his brother's partner, who had a settled practice, and offer from for Muslim Makonali community, mostly based in Bombay and Kathiawar. So, who were in search of a barrister to help their firm resolve a lawsuit, made him set sail for South Africa in April 1893 and reached Durban, where he was received by his employer Abdullah Seth, one of the most prosperous Indian businessmen in Natal. Thus, Providence took experience the youth to land which he was to the testing ground for his moral resources and spiritual experiences and also physical grit and determination in the face of various forms of racial discrimination and humiliations heaped upon him. And his the extraordinary series of events leading to the evaluation and implementation of Satyagraha in South Africa also may appear startling at present, but for a natural progression of circumstances lead to epic proportions of a non-violent struggle spread over two continents. The mass movement led by Gandhi, generated on basis of power of truth and conviction, are unsuppressed in history till today. So experiences of racial discrimination. When Gandhi arrived in South Africa on a 1 year contract to help a firm involved in lawsuit, he could not foresee that this land was to be his home for the next 2 decades and that this and his years of struggle in South Africa for the rights of Indians settled and working there would give to the world the unfailing weapon of Satyagraha. The dreadful racist regime of South Africa was revealed to him through various humiliating incidents, and also the, he made him resolute to stay back and fight for the restoration of human dignity of the Indians in South Africa. Besides attaining to his legal work, he expanded his contacts and studied the problems which the Indian community was facing, even as his personal trials and tribulations continued in the forms of racial abuse, which he faced stoically and emerged victorious. It is to be noted that background that the Indians were brought to South Africa to further the economic interests. The British rulers, because without indentured labor, they could not exploit the immense natural resources of the Natal Coast Belt. The Indians arrived in hordes, worked in various capacities, and brought prosperity to Natal. Be it as a indentured laborers or free businessmen. In due course of time, the Europeans began to feel threatened by the increasing number of Indians who were in many ways taking over some of the non-policed occupations. The occupations అనేటివి uh, this resentment gave rise to color prejudice, and the Indians were considered, to quote Lord Millar's words, etc., etc., strangers forcing themselves upon a community reluctant to receive them. This hatred was manifested through racial abuses, unjust laws, and heaps of humiliations. This was brought home to the youthful Gandhi for the first time at the railway station, where he was unceremoniously thrown out of the railway coach in spite of holding a valid first class ticket, left alone to shiver in the cold weather. This experience completely changed Gandhiji's life, thoughts, and deeds, swinging between the dilemma whether to return to India or fight the discrimination. He eventually decided on the later course of action. The racial abuse was also evident in the refusal of his entity to the hotels and lodges where Indians, called coolies, were prohibited from entering to all. Another unfortunate incident occurred when he had to travel from Charlestown to Johannesburg by stagecoach. Gandhiji was made to sit with the coachman on the box outside by the conductor, who later ordered him to sit on the floor on a dirty sackcloth. On his refusal to do so, he was subjected to a violent physical assault by the conductor. So, a timely intervention from some of the white passengers who protested at this brutality saved Gandhi from further humiliations. So, similar other experiences helped Gandhi to strengthen his resolve to fight for justice in a way unprecedented in the annals of history and marked the beginning of the civil disobedience. This method of non-violent but from struggle against apartheid in South Africa saw him emerge as a skilled lawyer, a political leader of a great maturity, flexibility, and imagination. And the Mahatma, the great soul, Gandhi gave the world the mighty unique weapon of satyagraha with the conviction of truth and power of non-violence. The veteran Gandhian Dr. R.R. Divakar aptly defines satyagraha as a new way of life, moral strength. It was the major resource of the non-violent mode of action. Moral purpose gave it an element of invincibility. Further, Gandhiji's inherent humanity and sense of social justice had been aroused by the numerous personal experiences of indignities to which he had his countrymen were being subjected to. So, Indians in South Africa, Gandhi studied the situation thoroughly, discovered that there were three categories of Indians in South Africa. The laborers, they had been brought to South Africa under a contract prepared in 1860 and comprised the largest sector of Indians in that country. Under the contract, the Indians were to be sent to Natal as workers recruited by Indians and also under the supervision of the immigrant agents appointed by the British colonial government. So the 5-year contract agreement was conducted in the presence of the protector of immigrants appointed for the protection of the rights and interests of the recruited laborers. So the laborers were promised the provisions of free food, housing facility, clothes, and medical benefits besides their monthly wages. On completion of 3 years, they were allowed to be freed from the agreement for which they had to pay £5 for the remaining 2 years under a rule made by in 1859. After 5 years of indenture, they could work at another places on better wages. Upon completing 10 years, they were either given free passage to India or could get land equal to the value of passage fare for their homeland. A majority of the laborers opted for settling down in South Africa. Even after the agreements were over, the agreements promised better deals, but the actual implementation of the same was far from satisfactory. The laborers were forced victims of ill treatment, resulting in severe hardship and suffering, even leading to deaths and suicides also, and often cheated by their so-called protectors or agents. This system of indentured labor was almost slavery for the poor laborers. So the second group of Indians was that of the children born to the uh, Indian laborers who had settled down in South Africa after the completion of the laborship, labor agreement period. The third one, the category of Indian settlers was the smallest but was in many ways more affluent than their fellow competitors. So they were called passengers because they had come to South Africa at their own expense, looking for business opportunities, and many among them went on to become successful businessmen due to their hard work and thrifty habits. So the economic success of this group of Indians gave rise to jealousies among the whites, and they resorted to racial abuses and discrimination against the Indians to express their resentment. So, struggling against racial discrimination, having suffered painful experiences of arrogant racism himself, Gandhi could understand why his fellow Indians were neither shocked nor surprised at his having been thrown out from the first class train compartment or various similar insults meted out to him. He was informed as how almost every Indian was subjected to a series of such indignities and insults but suffered silently because of livelihood compulsions. So the condition of Indians living in some areas, Natal, where they were forced to pay a poll tax of £3, live in ghetto-like conditions, no right to vote, and not allowed to walk on the roads or pavements, not allowed to stay outdoors after 9 p.m. unless they had a special permit. So even Gandhi was no exemption and was once beaten up by a policeman on duty for walking out at night. He was saved in time by Mr. Coates, an English poker friend. All this while, Gandhi worked on the lawsuit, studied the case thoroughly, and arrived at the conclusion that his client had the stronger case, but litigation would cause nothing but ruin for both claimant and defendant. So he requested for the appointment of an arbitrator, and finally his client won the case. So Gandhi also argued his client to reclaim the payment from the losser party in installments and achievement success through meditation. So, meanwhile, Gandhi felt that his South Africa needed brought together to fight the injustice headed upon them. After the preliminary survey, he called a meeting of the Indian community settled in Pretoria and asked them to be truthful and honest in their business dealings and personal lives. So, having completed his work in Pretoria, Gandhi was to return to India. But during the farewell dinner that was organized in his honor, Gandhi came across a news item in Natal Mercury about the Natal government's plan to introduce a bill to disfranchise Indians. Gandhi immediately realized the implications of this bill, which he said would strike at the root of our self respect. Having realized the importance of his services, the Indian community requested him to stay and guide them, as Gandhi tells us in this autobiography. So the farewell party was thus turned into a working committee. So Gandhi is the enrolled advocate in the Natal Supreme Court and drafted a petition to the Natal Legislative Assembly. So these are all some of the works where he was working in South Africa. Uh, so within the first 5 years of his stay in South Africa, Gandhi had studied the prevailing condition truly. The felt that the Indian community needed to be awakened from the white regime's new atrocious rules on the Indians through various acts. A tax of £3 was imposed on the Indians on their stay in South Africa and was justified by the Attorney General of Natal, who stated that the Indians are not to form a part and also parts of South African nation. So the Indians are to come here appreciated as laborers but not welcomed as settlers or competitors. That is the situation in South Africa. Gandhi faced this challenge bravely, although he was only an inexperienced young man leading the Indian settlers who were just beginning to be politically aware of their rights. Gandhi enabled them to bring into action all the possible available forces to protest, awaken and strengthen them for a righteous conflict, which went on to become the great Satyagraha movement for the rights of all Indians in South Africa. Gandhi thus brought to the fore peaceful and non-violent resistance to tyranny and oppression. So it was in South Africa that Gandhi discovered his own self from a shy and timid young man. So he matured into a successful practicing lawyer, an able organizer of men, and a great leader, getting together the Indians of South Africa who came from diverse backgrounds and different parts of India, spoke different languages and practiced different faiths. So he organized the Natal Indian Congress as the forum to express the Indian point of view in an alien land. So in 1896, Gandhi visited India and in an attempt to arouse interest in the grievances of Indians in South Africa. He wrote a popular brochure called the Green Pamphlet, citing the poor conditions of the Indian settlers in South Africa. It was a very dignified account of the Indian case, but was distorted by Reuters. and sent through cable to South Africa. So it created unnecessarily misunderstanding in the while community, resulting in unpleasant consequences later for Gandhi and other Indians. He also traveled extensively to various cities of the country, met various important people and editors of newspapers, acquainting them with the unfortunate conditions of the Indians in South Africa. So he made veteran Indian leaders like Badruddin Twajji, Sir Feroja Mehta, and Surendranath Banerjee, Balagangadhar Tilaku, Gopal Krishna Gokhale. He addressed a large public meeting in Bombay, and also was also scheduled to speak in Calcutta, but before that he received an urgent telegram from the Indian community in Natal, South Africa, asking him to return immediately. He sailed for Durban with his wife and children in November 1896. On arrival in Durban, he was put into 5 days quarantine as the European community. So he was angry due to the false versions and interpretations of Gandhi's green pamphlet. They threatened the Indians, including Gandhi, with dire consequences if they landed in South Africa. However, while disembarking, Gandhi was brutally attacked by an angry mob. Following the news of these, some of the cowardly attack, Joseph Chamberlain and the British Secretary of State of the Colonies in England sent an order to Natal to prosecute and also the wild attackers of Gandhi. But Gandhi himself refused to take an action against them. So, as he felt they were misled into attacking him, this gained him a lot of respect even among his opponents also. So it was in the second phase of his life in South Africa that Gandhiji's lifestyle underwent gradual changes. Though initially he preferred maintaining a lifestyle of an English barrister, he gradually realized the fertility of appliances and veered towards a life of he reduced his wants and expenses, studied the art of laundering, washing and ironing of clothes, and cleaned his own chamber pot and of his guests as well. Volunteered his free service for 2 hours daily as a compounder in a charitable hospital. So, read books on the nursing and midwifery and other actually served as a midwife during the birth of his fourth and last son. So, Ika Boer War broke out. Gandhi advised to the Indian community to support the British cause by the claimed their rights as British subjects. Service of humanity. Mahatma Gandhi views. Gandhi was moved by the misery and the sorrow of people around him. He decided to offer his selfless services, aroused his ingrained compassion and strengthened his resolve to work for the oppressed humanity all his life. The influence of religious scriptures like the Bhagavad Gita was profound. He adopted the karma yoga into his daily life in every possible way. The later he propounded by him and some of the roots in the basic teachings of the sacred Gita. So, John Ruskin's unto the last deeply influenced Gandhi, and the concept of Sarvodaya, upliftment of all, arose out of this. This led to the beginning of another spiritual journey of self-sacrifice and devotion to the service of mankind and brought to him the essential beauty of community living on the basis of equality and inherent dignity of manual labor. Gandhi was inspired to set up an ashram where he could practice this philosophy and marked the beginning of the Phoenix settlement, 14 miles distance from Durban. The writings of Tolstoy, Thoreau and Tolstoy, also affected him greatly, and his entire way of living underwent a spiritual transformation. In 1904, he had started a weekly journal, Indian Opinion, as a communication medium with the Indians as well as Europeans, in which week after week he poured out his soul in its columns. This also marked the beginning of Gandhi's future lifelong friendship with Mr. Henry S.L. Pollock, with whom he shared similar views on the essential things of life. In 1904, the Indian opinion and his family shifted to Phoenix Ashram. In 1906, he took the vows of celibacy and voluntary poverty. He founded the Tolstoy farm near Johannesburg. Gandhi inculcated Spartan simplicity and strict discipline and laid great emphasis on moral and physical hygiene as the basic rules of these settlements. In the process of continuous evolution of his life and philosophy, the Sarvodaya experiments were conducted through his constructive program factors like community living, communal harmony, basic education, emancipation of women, a removal of untouchability, cottage industries, trusteeship, etc. The Phoenix settlement and Tolstoy farm were living examples of his spiritual search for human growth and development. ఇంకా birth of Satyagraha. In Gandhi's great eventful life, the year 1906 was a significant landmark as it saw the first practical application of Satyagraha on the soil of South Africa, giving an underlying hope of life to tortured humanity. Gandhi could sense the simmering discontent among the Indian community as one oppressive act followed another and realized that this kind of brutal tyranny could only be defeated by spiritual strength arising out of the twin principles of truth and nonviolence. He understood the necessity to expand individual resistance to an organized mass movement and create a moral equivalent to war. The concept was clear in his mind, but indeed a name, and the great man tells us himself. So none of us knew what name to give to our movement. I then used the term passive resistance in describing it. The racial regime of South Africa had issued an ordinance to be imposed upon the Indian immigrants, requiring all Indians over the age of 80 to register with the authorities, submit to fingerprinting, and accept a certificate which they had to carry with them. So any Indian who failed to do so could be imprisoned, fined, like lost the right of residence, and even be deported. So even if he owned valuable property or engaged his right of residence, even be deported. So even engaged in important commercial relations. So the Satyagraha, according to Gandhiji, it is one of the vindication of truth, not by infliction of suffering on the opponent but on oneself. Gandhiji applied the principle of self-restraint and self-sacrifice and had the courage and conviction to inspire the Indian community to raise the imprisonment of imprisonment for upholding human rights. He proved by example that a satyagrahi it works not with the strength of the brute but with the strength of the spark of God. So the agitation against the injustice continued unabated under his leadership, and before Gandhiji's first prison term of 2 months was over, Gandhiji Smith sent him an emissary proposing to repeal the Act of the Indians. As General went back on his promise, the Indians burnt their registration certificates in protest and even defied the ban on immigration to transfer. So this was the final and the most organized phase of the great Satyagraha movement. In South Africa, led by Gandhi, the years 1906 to 1914 were the years to ultimate evolution, success of nonviolence, resistance to tyranny, a struggle which through suffering purified the participants, won over the opponents, and naturally drew worldwide attention. So, a struggle of Indians continued. Gandhiji was arrested in September 1909 and again in February 1909, and he was sentenced to 2 months rigorous imprisonment and 3 months hard labor, respectively. He is quoted as, as saying that the real road to ultimate happiness lies in going to jail and understanding suffering and privations there in the interests of one's own country and religion. In the year 1911, Gandhiji suspended the struggle as a provincial statements of the Asiatic issues in the Transvaal. It was proposed by the colonial government that assumed to repeal the Black Act. So, to remove the racial war from the unfair immigration law and to abolish the 3 pounds tax on Indians. So, but Gandhiji, he was very, he was one of the way of these promises as there had been precedents of their being broken. So this time again it was no different, and the Union government did back out on its promises. Further, the Supreme Court judgment gave a judgment declaring that only Christian marriages were valid in South Africa, thus making all the next to the South Africa regime plenty of time to deal with the strikes and law and order situation in Johannesburg, and was very tolerant about pursuing the issues related to the Indian community. But the colonial government failed to understand the concerns and continued to neglect the Indian culture. This naturally led to resumption of Satyagraha in October 1913. So the government came down with a heavy hand to crush it, but could not break its spirit. So the Indian women led by Kasturba fearlessly crossed the border between Transvaal and Natal without permits, headed to Newcastle. So they succeed. They were arrested, and as a result, the strike of the miners spread like wildfire. The thousands of miners and Indians preferred under Gandhiji's leadership marched to the Transvaal border as a symbol of non-violent defiance. Gandhi made strict rules to be followed by the Satyagrahis, asking them to submit patiently and unhesitatingly to insult. So plaguings and arrests before beginning the march. Gandhi made one last attempt to pursue General Smuts to accommodate the Indian demands, but was refused. That Gandhiji's indomitable spirit becomes evident even as he writes, I did not waken in the face of his incivility. The straight and narrow path I had to tread was before me. The next day, that means 6th November 1913, at the appointed stroke of the labor, one of the hour we offered prayers and commenced the march in the name of the God. The pilgrim band was composed of 2037 men, 127 women, and 57 children. So the great march was unique in its strength. And though Gandhiji was arrested and sentenced, the Satyagraha spread rapidly. There were almost 50,000 laborers on strike and several thousands Indians arrested and put in jails. The government tried to crash the movement with brute force, mistreating the Satyagrahis almost all in prison, trying to force the laborers to go back to work, but to no avail. The more there was repression, the more determined were the Satyagrahis, whose spirits remained unbroken even in the face of battles. So this is the one of the powerful weapon which was propounded by Mahatma Gandhi. Return of Gandhi. Gandhi left the shores of South Africa at the age of 45, a fully formed personality with no personal property and with only one ambition of serving his country and people. Though the Indian political leaders were aware of his work in South Africa, he was not much known to the Indians in general. To most Indians, he was the great Gandhi who had guided the Indians in South Africa. South Africa towards self respect and justice through Satyagraha. Gandhi was a full fledged Satyagrahi by the time he returned with a keen sense of self discipline, which he ardently followed although his life. On his return, Gandhi found himself in a country he scarcely knew, for he was away from his motherland for almost 28 years. He sought to understand the undercurrents of those times and searching for his roots, he was tentative and cautious in those early years in India. His political mentor, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, advised him to travel through various parts of India for a year so he could learn about his land and people. So, with his ears open but his mouth shut, he was convinced that the British rule was harming India. But India also needed to remove the evils prevalent in its society and system before she was fit for self governance. That's why the significance of Satyagraha as a potential tool of solving problems. It was, according to Gandhiji, Satyagraha in Champaran, Kheda, and Ahmedabad mill cases, the struggle against the Rowlatt Bill, the importance of non-violent struggle. These are all some of the Sabarmati Satyagraha Ashram 1915. Maximum of life laid down by our scriptures uh, for spiritual guidance, Gita, Bharat, Ramayana, etc. etc. The ashram was a living example of Gandhiji's ideology applied practically in day to day life. Soon, an untouchable family of three sought permission to live there, and Gandhi willingly accepted the family, who consented to follow the ashrama rules and regulations. Their admission created a flutter and lead to stoppage of all monetary help, but later, with help from an anonymous visitor, finances were stabilized. The admission of this family proved a valuable lesson to the ashrama inmates, training them to continuity, untouchability subsequently as the storm over their entry subsided. Gandhi received support from all quarters in his ashrama works. The ashrama functioned like an organized community where the Cheraka became the focal point of the Grama Swaraj and the sounds of the spinning wheel became the anthem of the masses toiling for freedom. The Khadi movement began in earnest. It remained the headquarters for the next 15 years. It was here that Gandhi made his devoted disciples and stanch followers like Mahadeva Desai and also Sardar Patelu. This ashram was Gandhi's abode till 1933 and was later turned into a center for the removal of untouchability. The ashram was a glorious symbol of Gandhiji's dedication to the service of mankind that continues to play an inspiring role till date. So, speeches at the Banaras Hindu University, February 1916. Gandhiji delivered his first public speech in India on 4th February 1916 on the occasion of the opening ceremony of the Banaras Hindu University, attended by many distinguished visitors like the Viceroy, Lord Admiral and Mrs. Annie Besant, and many members from India's erstwhile royal families. Gandhi, speaking in English, expressed his deep humiliation and shame at being compelled to address my own countrymen in a language that is a parent to me. So he emphasized upon the need to make Hindustan and the languages as the basic medium. These are all recommendations by him. Champaran Satyagraha 1917-18. The uncertainty over his actions in his homeland took a concrete shape in the Champaran movement in Bihar. The indigo fields of Champaran in Bihar provided him the first opportunity of using the powerful tool of satyagraha in solving a long standing dispute. It was during the Indian National Congress session at Lucknow in December 1916 that an obscure president from Bihar, Rajkumar Shukla, decided to acquaint his fellow countrymen with the plight of the indigo farmers. In its earlier years, the East India Company had discovered that the cultivation of the indigo plant was immensely profitable. The plant, a delicate one, needed marshy, needed marshy land for growth, and armies of peasants were recruited forcibly to cultivate it. So Gandhi went to Champaran undertaking a distinctively his own. It was the predecessor of the psychological pattern he applied to all his activities. He started with Patna, where he met many lawyers, Congress members, and people from various sections of our society and asked them to accompany him to Champaran and help the sharecroppers. He prepared for all eventualities unconditionally to help the cause of the indigo farmers. It was during the Champaran movement that he befriended some great future national leaders and lifelong associates like Dr. Rajendra Prasad and Acharya J.P. Krupalani, among others. Gandhiji's presence had certified the people, and it was felt that the only lost something would be done for the peasants, not for the to our cortex, but in an entirely new and unexpected way. That's why Gandhi explained his work plan to a convened committee of lawyers and teachers, where he said the time for legal action had passed, and now the need of examination for the facts to the interviews with the farmers and carefully reports. So British government to deficiency next to Ahmedabad textile mill labor the satyagraha, etc. While Gandhi was about to conclude his work in Champaran, he received an urgent appeal from the textile mill workers of Ahmedabad. So the dispute arose between the textile laborers and the textile mill owners of Ahmedabad. So it began basically over the dearness allowance payment DA to be made to the workers by the owners. Earlier during a plague epidemic, the workers had been granted a special bonus so that they would continue working during the epidemic period, and the bonus had continued even after the danger from the disease had subsided. But in January 1918, mill owners decided to withdraw the same, and in reply, the workers asked 50% raise in their wages. Gandhi, upon being informed of the situation, he was asked to intervene. First, by one of the mill owners, he went to Ahmedabad and started investigating the matter thoroughly. After having studied the cost of living and workers' conditions, he concluded that the increase of 35% was appropriate. So he felt that the mill workers' grievances were genuine and the mill owners were unrelenting to redress these grievances. Both sides agreed to submit the dispute to arbitration on behalf of the workers. In a surprising move, the mill owners declared that they would not abide by the arbitration and threatened to dismiss all these workers who were not ready to accept a 20% increase in the living allowance. Gandhi advised the workers to demand no more and no less than 35% increase as their living allowances. Conflict followed the rejection of this demand by the mill owners, and Gandhi found himself leading the struggle of the mill hands and advised them to go on strike, but by taking recourse to non-violence and also self-support through other work to sustain themselves. Many of them helped in setting up a raving school in Gandhiji's ashram and not surrender until the raise of 35% was secured and not to indulge in quarrels, theft, and destruction of mill owners' property. Gandhiji organized non-violent struggle paid off with the use of satyagraha as the technique to achieve a constructive solution to a problem. So that's why he solved a number of problems as a great leader. He is not studied, but he is a practical man. Kheda Satyagraha, March 22 to June 6, 1918. 1918, large parts of Gujarat were affected by severe famine, and Kheda was the worst hit district. So the agrarian economy was devastated, but the British government too uh, not settled all this was. So Ahmedabad Labour Satyagraha established the strength of dealing with any kind of conflict or fasting fruit to be a greatly effective weapon of non-violence with its coercive character. The next important factor here was the truth factor, the justification behind the demand of the self-suffering was present in the workers' attitude. The workers also received training in various forms of labor during the strike period, which included carrying heavy loads of brick for building at the ashram. So the Satyagraha was effectively published through peace marches, slogans of ECTEC and distribution of leaflets by the Satyagrahis. Throughout the peaceful struggle, the initiative which is Satyagrahis. This movement also highlights the role of arbitration in disputes as to how it can help conclude a Satyagraha by a peaceful solution to the conflict by Mahatma Gandhi. So, he solved a lot of problems. Inka one more, the Rowlatt Satyagraha, 1st March to 18th April 1919. The famous Rowlatt Bill was the outcome of the recommendations made by the Sedition Committee presided over by Sir Rowlatt in 1918 and was prepared to strengthen the hand of the government in the control of crime and sedition. The Rowlatt Act, Government of India Act 1919 was formed to enable an actual offences to be tried expeditiously before strong court, consisting of three High Court judges with no right to appeal. It also provided powers of preventive detention, the arrest and confinement of persons suspected of acts threatening public safety, and also power to ask such people to furnish security and reside in a particular place and to abstain from any specified act. So the act also provided the authorities to detain dangerous persons. So Rowlatt Bill totally denied civil liberties to Indians and was also responsible for the bringing Gandhi into active Indian politics. So this was turning point in Gandhi's life as a strong political force in India as well as the entire world and became instrumental in bringing him to the mainstream of politics of the country. So faced with the political situation of grave importance, he realized that the time might have arrived for the application of the principles of Satyagraha on a national level. So he traveled through the country to prepare people for a peace movement against the Rowlatt Bill in spite of official and unofficial appeals. So the Viceroy signed the bill on March 18, 1919 and the Rowlatt Act became law. Gandhi, the repressive Rowlatt bills were a direct breach of faith and betrayal of trust. So continued British educates. So Gandhi, the idea of Hartal to protest against the Rowlatt Act on 6th April 1919 was unique and the response to this call was widespread. Gandhi writes in his autobiography. So the immediate objective of this satyagraha, Gandhi on 13th April 1919, when Gandhi had announced his 3-day past decision in Ahmedabad, a horrifying massacre of innocent citizens took place in the city of Amritsar. A peaceful gathering of people had assembled at the Jallianwala Bagh to celebrate Baxi and also discuss the participation in anti-Rowlatt agitations. Brigadier General Reginald Dyer, who had been given the task of maintaining peace and order in the area, learned about the meeting at Jallianwala Bagh and regarded it as a deliberate defiance of prohibitory orders regarding public meetings. So, Jallianwala Bagh is sent troops, public meetings to Dyer sent troops and ordered indiscriminate firing upon the crowd till all ammunition was expended. So, with no forewarning, in this some display of British atrocity, the official count registered 400 dead and 1 to 2,000 injured, but the unofficially inquiry conducted by Gandhi himself estimated 1,200 dead and 3,600 wounded. So the atrocities continued, which included public stripping and plaguing of Indians and General Dyer's infamous the travelling orders and a particular street in Amritsar where a mob had beaten off an English woman. Indians were made a crowd on all fours on his street as punishment. The British government appointed the Hunter Committee to look into the Punjab atrocities, but Gandhi and other national leaders boycotted it and also constituted a parallel enquiry committee on behalf of the Congress to look into the matter. It comprised of Motilal Nehru, C.R. Das, Abbas, and Jayakar, and also Gandhi. And its findings were not disapproved to all. So, this tragic incident proved beyond doubt, but there was no hope in the British government, the British officials suffering pangs of guilt and with the desire to do better for India in future. Brought in the same year 1919, Montague Chelmsford reforms offering Indian's constitution and a share in the government, but it was more than genuine offer. Gandhi advised the leaders of the Indian National Congress to make a success of the new instrument of reforms granted by the British government and also prepare for a fuller measure of responsibility. So, this is the sum of the uh, agitations with satyagraha and non-violence methods by Mahatma Gandhi. Still, the moderates, extremists, and revolutionists. The moderates, according to Gandhiji, during the early years 1885-1905, the Indian National Congress henceforth referred to Indian National Congress provided a common stage for the leaders from diverse parts of the country. Though the Congress represented the entire nation, members of some classes, castes, and occupations and provinces were more than others. The members of the educated middle class, they were predominant in the poor members. The number of Brahmin caste, they were comparatively higher to those of other castes, while a number of journalists, doctors, teachers were also members. It was the lawyers who dominated in the occupations. The members from Bombay, Bengal, Madras Presidency were more in number compared with the other members, other parts of the country. So the masses and the landed classes, they were conspicuous by their absence. In short, the Congress was by and large a middle class affair, and it was but natural that majority of the members of the Indian National Congress belonged to the middle class during the early years, since it was this class that took to modern education and played a pioneering role in its foundation. The Congress, since its establishment, was under the influence of moderate leaders, most of whom were first generation English educated Indians. The moderate leaders were influenced by Western political ideas and practices, especially by the political philosophy, political philosophy of liberalism. The liberal philosophy of moderate Congress leaders gave emphasis on the dignity of the individual, individual's right to freedom, equality of all, irrespective of caste, creed, and etc. This liberal philosophy guided the moderate leaders of the Congress in opposing the autocratic attitude of the British government, demanding rule of law and equality before law, and advocating secularism. Some of the prominent moderate leaders who became presidents of the Congress in its early years were Dadabhai Nauroji, Badruddin Chabji, and Mehta, Feroz Mehta, and P. Ananda Acharyulu, and Surendra Nath Banerjee, and Ramesh Chandra Dutt, Ananda Mohan Bose, and Gopal Krishna Gokhale. Some other moderate leaders were Mahadeva Rande, Madan Mohan Malavya, G. Subramania Iyer, and Dinesh E. Vacha. So they are the some of the leaders who are the members in the Indian National Congress. Ideology and methods of work. The moderate leaders made modest demands from the British rulers in a very cautious and peaceful manner, mainly for two reasons. Firstly, most of the moderate leaders had an enduring attachment of the British way of life, a belief in the British sense of justice and fair play, and a deep sense of gratitude towards British rules. They believed that it was the association with the British rule and English education that had exposed them to modern ideas such as liberty, equality, democracy, and dignity of the individual. Moreover, they were convinced that it was only due to the British rule that the much needed law and order and effective administration had been established in India. Secondly, the moderates were also aware that the Indian National Congress was a young organization in its early stage of development. They did not want to incur the wrath of the British rulers, which could have resulted in suppression of their activities and nipped the Congress in the bud. The moderates genuinely believed that India had gained from the political connection with the British and often acknowledged their loyalty to British rule. However, this did not mean that they were not patriotic. The moderates disfavored a direct confrontation with the British rulers, but wanted to change their rule to reflect the interests of the country. Later, when many of the moderate leaders realized that British rule had done a lot more harm to the country than good, so they underwent a change of heart and began to press for Swaraj or self government for India within the British Empire. So they were aware that national consciousness among the Indian people had to be promoted and consolidated before throwing a direct challenge to British rule. The historian Bipin Chandra has summed up the political method of the moderates as constitutional agitation within the four walls of law and slow, orderly political progress. The moderate leaders adopted the strategy of influencing and organizing public opinion to compel the British to approve their moderates' demands bit by bit. Their political strategy was to emphasize building a public opinion in India as well as outside India. Especially in Britain, in India, they sought to promote national consciousness and educate the people on political issues by submitting politicians to British authorities, organizing meetings, passing resolutions, and giving speeches outside India in Britain, they made efforts to familiarize the people of Britain and the Parliament with the real conditions in India. They carried out active propaganda to influence the public opinion in Britain by sending delegations of leading Indians to Britain. In 1889, a British committee of the Indian National Congress was founded in 1890. This committee started a journal called India. Dadabhai Navaraj spent a major part of his life in Britain and played an exemplary role in propounding India's case. Contribution of the moderates. The moderate leaders of the Congress tried to generate public opinion on all important measures of the government. The Congress program during the early phase 1885 to 1905 can be divided under three categories: constitutional and administrative reforms, social reforms and defense of civil rights, economic reforms. So, one of the major demands of the moderate leaders was proper representation of the Indians on the legislative council as well as increase in the power of these councils. The moderate leaders also pressed for reforms in the administrative system. They argued increase in the number of Indians in the higher echelons of administrations, separation of judiciary from the executive, promotion of primary education and technical education and higher education, establishment of agricultural banks to prevent the farmer from being exploited by the money lenders, development of irrigation to avoid famines, extension of medical and health facilities, reform of the police system, which was dishonest, inefficient, unpopular. So the moderate leaders voiced their opinion on issues related to terrorists outside India. Some of the related issues, other territories of India, they opposed the annexion of Burma and the attack on Afghanistan and also the tribal people of the northwestern India. They demanded improvement in the condition of the Indian workers who had migrated to other countries like South Africa, Malaya, West Indies, and British Guiana. So the moderates who had developed a firm commitment to the principle of democracy and also tried to safeguard the civil rights of the Indian people and supported social reforms in Indian society. According to them, a vigorous movement to eradicate social evils and backwardness was necessary to make India fit for self government. They defended the freedom of speech, the press, thought of thought of expression, thought and association. Their advocating of these ideas popularized them among the Indians. So, however, in the economic critique of colonial rule, that the moderates played their most important role. The moderate leaders like Dadabhai Nauroji and Mahadeva Govinda Rade, Govinda Ranade made scathing criticism of the economic policies followed by the British rulers. The moderate leaders, through books, newspaper articles, and speeches, exposed the British government's economic exploitation in India. The drain theory, in which the moderates argued that wealth from India was being drained to England, exploded the myth that British rule was good for India. The moderate demand changes in official policies on industry, agricultural, tariff, transport, and taxation that would improve the system of India. So Gopal Krishna Gokhale, 1866-1915, he was one of the most prominent moderate leaders of the Indian National Congress. He was born 6th May 1866 in Kotak village of Ratnagiri district, Maharashtra. He belonged to the first generation of Indians to receive college education. He graduated from the Elphinstone College in Mumbai in 1884, where he became extremely proficient in English also. So he was exposed to Western political thought and writings of John Stuart Mill and Jason Mill, Edmund Burke, John Bright, and John Morley. So he was influenced by them. Through later Gokhale also. The some of the moderates, Gokhale and Gandhi. Gandhi valued the contribution of the moderates in laying the foundation of the Indian national movement. He was aware that it was the moderate leaders like Dadabhai Navaraj who had exposed the exploitative nature of British rule. According to him, deriding elderly leaders like Nauroji Gokhale would be like kicking the very step from which we have risen. Gandhi's concern for social reform was legacy of the moderates. He wanted his followers to question unjust social practices and had included a number of social reforms in his constructive program. At the same time, however, he did not agree with the approach of constitutional agitation followed by the moderates. He was especially against petitioning, which admitted the inferiority of the Indians. Unlike the moderates, Gandhi did not consider British rule as good and indispensable. For him, British rule was an evil rule. Moreover, the Western style democracy and secularism, which was utilized by moderates, was not acceptable to Gandhi. That's why Gandhi shared a very special relationship with Gokhale. Gokhale firmly believed in the need for spiritualization of politics. Communal harmony and universal education inspired Gandhi and considered Gokhale as his political guru. Gokhale not only strongly supported Gandhi during his struggle in South Africa but also helped him to collect funds for the relief of the suffering there. Gokhale guided Gandhi to travel in India for 1 year and also gain experience of the Indian problems and conditions, and only then concern himself with politics. Gandhi derived the principle of spiritualization of politics from Gokhale. Spiritualization of politics from Gokhale, when he received, he think about it, how to spread in the society. So Gandhi learned from Gokhale that the means for bringing about change in society should be pure, peaceful, and legitimate. Gandhi said, Gokhale taught me that the dream of every Indian who claims to love his country should be not to glorify the country in language, but to spiritualize its political life and also spiritualize myself. I have dedicated myself to that ideal. I may fail, and to that extent I fail, sir. Gokhale and Gandhi differed on certain issues relating to modern technology. Western education and industrialization, Gokhale criticized certain ideas put forward by Gandhi in his Hindu Swaraj. According to Gokhale, to the village industries were of importance. To survive in a competitive world, it was necessary for the Indians to accept modern means of technology and energy for production of goods. Gandhi did not accept Gokhale's faith in constitutional method as a means of achieving political reform. He did not have faith in Western education, while Gokhale made utmost efforts to spread it in India. Unlike Gokhale, Gandhiji was religious, but his religious ethos was tempered by rationalism. Gokhale and Gandhi had a different style of functioning. The speeches of Gokhale were addressed not to the masses, but to the educated middle classes. He worked for the masses, but did not work among them. In contrast, Gandhi chose to work not only for the masses, but also among them. So the rise of extremism on the Indian political scene was not sudden. In fact, it had been growingly steadily since of the uprising of 1857. Though the uprising was brutally suppressed, growing steadily by the British. The ideas of Swadharma and Swaraj, which had kindled the uprising, continued to on an undercurrent among the Indian people. The English educated classes had remained aloof from the uprising. In the later half of the 19th century, the work of leaders like Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, Swami Vivekananda, Swami Dayananda Saraswati, and also Vishnu Shastri, Aravinda, and etc., instilled a sense of pride in the ancient Indian civilization. They were successful to a certain extent in promoting political radicalism and bridging the gulf between masses and the English educated class. The work of the moderate leaders had also exposed the evils of British rule and also promoted the spread of national consciousness. The peaceful methods used by the moderate leaders. The leaders were not effective in making the British government accept their demands. As a result, a number of political conscious people became frustrated and disillusioned. At the end of the 19th century, a strong feeling arose among the people that more radical political action was needed to force the British to accept popular demands. Various international events also gave impetus to the growth of extremism in India also. Revolutionary movements in Ireland, Russia, Egypt, Turkey, China, and the Boer War in South Africa made the Indian leaders aware that the British rule could only be challenged by putting a united stand against it. The defeat of the Indian army by the Ethiopians in 1896 and the Russian army by the Japanese in 1905 showed that the Europeans were not invincible. All this instilled a sense of self respect and self confidence in the Indian nationalists. The
Sir,
extremist leaders,
sir,
sir, చెప్పండి సార్.
time 5 that, sir.
ఓకే
ఆపేద్దాం.
సార్. ఒక లాస్ట్ సెంటెన్స్ ఉంటుంది.
కానీ, sir.
Thank you, sir. The extremist leaders of Indian National Congress like Bala Gangadhar Tilak, Bipin Chandra Palu, and Lala Lajpat Rai, Arvind Ghosh, they articulated radical political ideas against the colonial rule. So, the first three of them became famous as the trio of extremist leadership, Lal Bal Pal. So they became prominent after the partition of Bengal in 1905. Their radical ideology and program became popular during the movement against partition of Bengal and also known as the Swadeshi movement. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Good evening.
Good
Tomorrow,
evening. Sir, any technical problem?
Sir, no audio.
Sir. Hello.